Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share, all the things. We just passed 750 downloads, which is really exciting. So thank you to you all for supporting that. I'm excited for our guest today. Mike Machin is in Arte also. That's where we met. He's been in the entrepreneur space since 2002. He started his graffiti art supply business that he runs right now in 2015, where his goal was to help the community and make a difference for kids' lives, from what I understand. Tell us a little bit about that journey. What got you into graffiti art? It sounds so fun.
Sure.
But tell us a little bit about where that went and where you're going with it.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. I'll try to get through this as concise as possible. I tend to ramble sometimes, but so I started a business in 2002, which was motion graphics. I was doing design and animation for TV shows, directing music videos, and doing things like that. In 2014, excuse me, I started volunteering at a place called the Venice Art Walls, and that's it's sort of what's left over from this old Venice pavilion that used to be covered in graffiti. And it was also sort of there was a lot of drug deals and a lot of fights and kind of like negative things going on there. So the Venice city of Venice, I don't know who did it, but they ended up taking that thing out, and they left two walls as sort of a monument to that old pavilion that was there. And it's a legal venue for people to do graffiti on, but it's managed by a nonprofit. So I was volunteering there and basically just giving people, telling them where they could paint and asking them questions and kind of helping them navigate the space and things like that. And so as an old graffiti writer, I was in a position to kind of tell them certain things about, we have kind of like I guess, unwritten rules within that culture. So I would tell them, if you're going to cover this up, you have to cover it all the way, just kind of like letting them know how to navigate it so they don't kind of piss other people off and things like that. And so through those kind of conversations, I found myself talking to younger people, maybe like young teenagers. And as a person in my mid 40s at the time, it sort of clicked when I realized that these kids were listening to me. And so it kind of brought me back to thinking about when I was a teenager. And if I was talking to somebody in their mid 40s and they were trying to tell me, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. In my mind, I was like, as a teenager, I wouldn't listen to that guy because he's an old guy and, whatever, I'm going to do whatever I want. But since I was part of their culture, and there's sort of, at least within most of the culture, there's sort of a respect for people that came before you, especially people that were around long before, maybe even you were even born, kind of thing. So that's where it clicked when I realized I had this opportunity, because I can speak the same language. I can sort of engage with young people based on this mutual participation in this culture. So when I was doing that, it just really sparked a passion, and it kind of created sort of a feeling of responsibility to kind of use that opportunity that I had to create something of my own, because I was running my motion graphics business at the time. So, and that place was only open on the weekends. So that I was sort of thinking, there's only so much I can do 2 days a week. Is there something I can do that kind of merges these things together? So what ended up happening was I thought of, how can I create a space that I can still run my business, but allow, some of these kind of opportunities to happen. So I ended up renting my house to my buddy, and I rented a space in San Pedro, California. And it was basically just almost like a warehouse, but it was just a sort of a gutted retail space. And what I did was just, my dad and I built a wall in the middle, and I slept in the back, and we had this community space in the front. So the community space was, it started out as just an art gallery. And then there was just a table with sketchbooks and supplies. And part of the graffiti culture is, we call it black booking. It's like when you draw on your sketchbook, it's those black hardcover sketchbooks. And so you draw on each other's books, or you trade books. I'll draw on yours, you draw on mine, and people go to sort of graffiti shows or graffiti art shows, and they get other people to sign their books. It's kind of a thing within the culture. So I thought, if I need to be somewhere on my computer all the time doing this motion graphics stuff, I could easily do that and allow this part of the culture to happen. So what ended up happening was kids would stop in after school, and we'd end up having like 6, 7, 8 kids in there at a time, and they're all just drawing and having conversations with each other. And then I would kind of stay out of their way a little bit, but every now and then I would go and join them at the table and maybe try to answer any questions that they had and just keep an eye on them and stuff. But then that ended up, obviously it was costing a lot of money doing that. And I was living this like really weird lifestyle of sleeping in the back of this building that didn't have any air conditioning, no heat, no kitchen, no shower. I was like showering at the YMCA. So it was just like, this is not going to be sustainable, especially like I don't really want to be single for the rest of my life. And that's not the most appealing, kind of situation.
Right. Yes.
So I was like, I need to figure this out. And so not to get too much into the motion graphics, but that whole business kind of experienced its own weird little recession with Netflix and all the streaming stuff. I was working for network companies. So all of the works started getting really sporadic and kind of drying up. So I ended up thinking, these kids were coming in too, and they was always asking, like, do you sell anything here? Like, you just have this space with art on the walls. Like, how are you making any money? And I was like, maybe I'll sell some stuff. So we got a retail counter and started selling supplies, and then we started selling paint, and then we started making our own products, and it just scaled from there. And now we have 2 locations. We still have the original. Well, it's not the original one, but it's the original. I ended up moving up the street when a better opportunity came. But so we still have that original sort of location in San Pedro. And then I just opened another one a year ago in Las Vegas. And so we do all the e-commerce fulfillment in Las Vegas. And we also print stickers. That's kind of a big part of the graffiti culture. So that's also one of the main revenue generators in the business. It's kind of like 70%. So that's basically the story that got me to where I'm at right now.
So curious, because I don't know much about graffiti, and probably some of the listeners don't. When I think of graffiti, I think of like people painting buildings that shouldn't be painting buildings and doing a lot of destructive stuff. And obviously that's not what you're helping with. So tell us a little bit about like, what is a graffiti culture that's the good side of it, that's not the side that like we see on the side of trains and buildings and stuff like that, where people are wrecking public property.
Yeah.
How does this kind of work into what you're doing and to what's actually happening in like out there, I guess, if you can connect the two, because I don't know much about it.
Yeah, for sure. So that's sort of the interesting part. And I guess dichotomy is a good word to use here, because it's like, I was part of that whole culture. So I'm not trying to say like, oh, I never did any of that stuff. Like I did do that stuff. And it's what's gained me the credibility to actually speak to these kids. So it's kind of like when I think about it, a drug addict is going to be a lot more suited to help another drug addict get off of drugs. You know what I mean? Like they have that credibility, or somebody that has been overweight is going to help somebody go through that journey. If somebody's been fit their whole life and they try to tell somebody that's been struggling their whole life, it's the things that Andy Frisella and Sal Frisella talk about. Like they have that, what's called the fat gene, so that's the way I kind of look at it is, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that I am able to do had I not actually participated in those things, because I wouldn't have the quote street cred, the credibility among the culture, because there's sort of there's there's a legal way to do it, but if that's all you ever did, then there's a certain amount of like, oh, your work is good, but you didn't put yourself at risk, and you didn't do all of these kind of things. So that's that part of it. But then the other thing is, the way I see it is, what I wanted to do was provide an alternative to them. So instead of telling them,
don't do
hey,
it,
you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be on the freeways, don't go in the train yards, don't do this, don't do that. It's like, hey, you can come here and do this. And I'm not going to tell you not to do that stuff. I'm not going to encourage you to do anything, but I'm going to provide this venue for you. So as far as the positive side, there's a artistic expression that's, incredibly positive. I understand that there's a destructive side of it, but then there's a lot of really great work being created through this medium. So there's definitely that side that's pure artistic. Obviously, a lot of times that ends up in places that maybe you or some other people wouldn't really want to see it. And I can see both sides. So I'm kind of like the person that can be on both sides of the fence and kind of talk to people that are outside of the culture that maybe have similar questions as you do. And then I can also talk to these kids and have credibility on both sides. So I was able to create relationships with different people. So for example, there's a like a sort of a high-end art space in San Pedro. Well, in Palos Verdes, it's like kind of where the money is in that area. And so I was able to form a relationship with some people on that side and kind of expose what, this sort of culture is about to people that aren't normally part of it. And so the other thing, as far as the positive is concerned, is another thing that we did that sort of tried to show these kids an alternative, which was, we started a crew called the Cuts Crew. It's a graffiti crew. And so within the graffiti culture, there's things called crews, and it's basically just a group of people that are selected to become part of this group. And so we started a crew, but we only did community service type of work. So what we do is we'll find, one of those alleys that has like a mattress and a bunch of trash and dressers, and people light that stuff on fire. Like, it's just those really kind of like neglected sort of areas. So we'll clean all that stuff up, and then we'll paint a positive mural on the wall that says "Clean up the streets." And so that is designed to be another sort of vehicle to show these kids, like, you don't have to do all of this stuff. Again, we're not going to tell you not to do any of that stuff,
right?
But
Giving them a better example.
Yeah, this is something else you could do with it. So
awesome. So what being you've been down that, and a lot of listeners that are entrepreneurs and stuff like that, and just understanding, they want to learn about people. So what causes, like, what is the outlet of graffiti? What do you believe that kind of comes from, and how can, I guess, a not in the industry person help people that are out there? And I'm not just talking about graffiti, but people that are self-destructive, destructive to property, like all of that stuff, which is all in the same kind of line. How can you help them if they don't really respect you? I guess, like you said, you're not an in. So what are some ways that someone could help someone? Say they know a kid that's in this line, is going down this path. How can they help them? Like, what would have helped you as a kid or an adult? I don't know when you were at graffiti and stuff, but what would have helped you get out of those situations?
Well, I think one of the things is to not try to get them out of it, is, like I was saying, is to try to provide something, an alternative. And so what I've seen some businesses do is they'll provide a venue for them. And so, for example, in San Pedro, there's it's an electronic shop, and it's just, this old couple, family owned business. And I don't know how it started, but they ended up just allowing people to paint the back of their building. They said, as long as you paint this wall and don't tag on my dumpster and don't tag on the front of my building and things like that, keep it on this back wall, you can do whatever you want back there. So those kind of things obviously are a little bit hard to control, because the more people you get coming in and doing that kind of stuff, the more it's going to kind of spread out into other areas that it's not supposed to be. But for the most part, the culture regulates that kind of stuff. So if you were to say, if you had a business, like a warehouse or something, and you said, these kids are tagging on my warehouse all the time, and I want to try to figure out how to get them to stop doing that. One of the ways you could do it is to let them paint the back of it. There's a lot of things that come along with it, a lot of trash and things like that. So it's not an easy thing to manage.
So what is it that causes people to want to do that? What is that expression that you feel it comes from, like a traumatic childhood a lot of times, or some kind of way of getting out that they can't necessarily get out by just, say, going and talking to people or working out at the gym or whatever, getting their frustrations out? What is it that causes that? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that I hear a lot, and I think there's some kids that just have like a rebellious kind of way about them. I feel like I was one of those kids. I was like, just causing trouble, I guess, when I was a kid. There was no reason. I had a good upbringing, two parents in the house. I had all of the things, that you would assume is going to raise a good kid, but I was the only one out of the family that was getting arrested and getting caught drinking behind the building and doing I wasn't doing anything too bad, but it was like, I was kind of skating with trouble.
You were the outlaw in the family.
Yeah. So I also grew up being an artist, so I was drawing from the time I can remember. So probably the time I could hold a pencil, I started drawing. So my parents always encouraged that. But then when I found graffiti, it kind of merged that kind of rebellious thing with art. And it kind of really, one of the positive things is it re-sparked my passion for art, which I had kind of lost, throughout as I got older, as an older kid, so then, but I've also heard people coming from rough neighborhoods. This is a very common theme, is they say, in my neighborhood, it was either join a gang or do graffiti. And I ended up choosing graffiti. And a lot of them say that graffiti saved their life because that was the outlet that they felt that they had. So I don't have that experience. I didn't grow up in those kind of neighborhoods, but I have a lot of people in my network that did. And that's a very common thing that I hear a lot, because when you do go in one of those two directions, you do have a group of peers, so maybe they felt some kind of protection or whatever that is. Camaraderie. Yeah, so
connected. Yeah,
those are two things that I feel like probably lead people into that.
That's awesome. So I know you, like you said, you lived in the back. You were, showered at the YMCA and stuff like that. What are some tips now for aspiring entrepreneurs that are in that same position with whatever business they're in? On how to get out of that and how to actually start to build a successful business, and the mindset that kept you going through that also at the same time, because every business has its tough times, maybe not to the point of that, but like whatever it is, what were some of the mind shifts that you had, and then what started to shift it from that to where you're, starting to build a successful business?
Well, so in the beginning, it was mainly just a commitment. So I was reading about this in Ed's book, and I've read this many times. It's like, are you interested or are you committed? And that's probably one of the biggest determining factors that kept me sleeping in the back and doing all of these kind of things, because I was committed to it. And I was trying to find the belief, which I'm still trying to find it. But so I was committed. So every day when it sucked, and every day when I woke up and I was like, oh my God, it's hot, or it's cold, or I don't want to go to the Y to shower, I don't want to do all of these kind of things, I was still committed to building this thing. So I have that kind of sort of all in kind of way about me. Like if I commit to something and I believe that it's going to work, or I have enough belief to keep going, that's one thing that pushes me probably more than anything. But as far as building a successful business, it was a lot of the basics. It was creating the core values and actually using them. So we use them all the time. Anytime I correct anybody or praise anybody, it's based on a core value. That's been a big deal. Systems. I mean, it's kind of the boring, normal stuff. I mean, it was like a couple of years ago, I didn't really even fully understand what systems were. And so it was on the first Arte call that Andy was talking about it. It was right when the pandemic was coming around. And he was talking about how it's important to get your systems, especially in the time that we're about to experience. And so I remember on that call, I was like, oh, damn. What are systems? You know, I started buying the books and reading things. I read the Traction and Clockwork and all these different books. And I started it was one of the most stressful times in my whole business, because I was like, we have all of these things that we do, but I've never written any of this stuff down. I always just tell people, okay, here's how we print the stickers. Here's how we ship the packages. Here's how we do this. And then I expect them to know it, but it was never documented and organized. And it's still not, I still don't, I'm not 100% happy with where we are with the systems, but as far as like going through that whole process and refining the systems and getting everybody on board, that was another huge thing. So I feel like there's probably a whole bunch of other things, but I think
you mentioned reading. So how much do you attribute like reading and, obviously you're in Arte and associations, where did that kind of fit into, you feel, on a success level?
That was massive. And honestly, it was interesting because I just had this meeting with my team. It was after the recent summit. When I came back, I wanted to, because one of the things that I took from the summit, one of the biggest things was seeing the First Form facility and seeing how everybody seemed like they were on board with this idea of personal development. And so I was thinking, it kind of goes back to also having this opportunity, because most of my team is young people and it's their first job. So I started thinking, I want to implement personal development into our culture. So one of the first things we did was I asked everybody, would you guys be interested in having part of our weekly meetings as checkups and see if we're reading every day? So it was 10 pages a day, just the kind of thing that most of us do. And that's what I do. I read 10 pages every single day. And one of the ways that I got them to understand how big of a deal it is, because it's one thing to say, yeah, there's so much knowledge in books and you should read, but why should you read? You're condensing all of this information that somebody spent years gathering. But I found a visual on what I could show them. And I said, so let me try to make this as concise as possible. So I remember when I started taking reading very seriously, and I remember what book I read. So what I did was I went on Amazon, I found the date that I started doing that. So I knew that was a starting date of when I took reading seriously, and not only reading, but implementing what I learned and into my business, and strategically reading books that I felt like I needed at the time. And then I went into my Shopify analytics and I looked at the monthly sales, and I found that date where I started reading. And so when you look at the graph, it was from 2015 to today, or whatever today was when I did this, it wasn't like a month ago or something like that. So the monthly sales was just kind of whatever, all the way up until the time I started reading. And then right when I started reading and implementing, the sales went up. It was like one of those crypto coin things that you see. It was like, for years, nobody even knew what this coin was. And then all of a sudden, boom, it shot up. So we went from something like, I don't know, 3,000 to 4,000, 2,000 a month sales. And then now we're breaking 75,000 a month. And that happened between 2020 and 2022. And that's when I started reading.
So you started reading in 2015, did you say?
No, I started the business in 2015, but I
Okay.
I
Started
did
reading in
different
2020.
personal, yeah, 2020. So I did different personal development stuff like meditation and different things like that, but I never really took reading seriously. And it wasn't until 2020 that I really took it seriously. I probably read more books in the first quarter of, or maybe not, that's, the first half of 2020 than I did my whole life, so it was just
Right.
not something that I ever really did. And
That's so awesome.
seeing that visual, it just really, it's solidified it for me too, because when I saw it, I was like, oh damn, like,
So what if you read 20 pages a day? So,
yeah, I don't know.
so you mentioned that you also did a lot of meditation. Do you do a lot of meditation and visualization? Is that like a daily practice for you? And I know that's something that people talk about all the time. I know it's something I do, but how have you felt that that's impacted also your success and your growth and your personal everything, personal fortitude, I guess, all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think I started meditating in like 2010 or something like that. I was a very angry person. I was getting mad multiple times a day, and I realized I wasn't the kind of person I wanted to be, and I was kind of pushing people out of my life because I was just not pleasant to be around. I was never violent, but I was just, nobody wants to be around somebody that's pissed off all the time. I mean, that's just how it is, well,
Right.
maybe there are, I don't know. I would assume nobody does, but so I wanted to correct that about myself. And so I found with meditation, what I learned was you do have control over your mind. It's not easy to control, but you do have control over your emotions, and you can use these tools. And I just did the basic breath stuff. And another one that I found really helpful was just similar to just focusing on your breathing, except for you imagine this like pure healing light coming in, and then when you exhale, it's like this dark black smoke that kind of is pushing all the negativity and sickness out of your body. And so I just did those things for a very long time. Recently, I've sort of switched my meditation practice over to visualization within the last year. And so I try to just do that 10 minutes a day. And I find I get the same benefits. I think I do, but it's still focusing your mind on something. It's just that now I'm focusing on what I want in the future. And so as far as like, if that stuff works, I mean, I've heard other people say it does. For me, I've seen things happen where I've gotten off track with my visualization and for several months, and then the monthly sales were kind of tanking, and I'm like, oh man, maybe I got to get this back going again. And there was one time where it happened, which was kind of interesting. It was like, I realized, I was like, I really have to do this. I got to get this back going again. And so I started doing it. The next day we had like the highest sales that we've had in a very long time. And the other thing was, I had missed the Arate call, and usually the thing expires within a certain amount of time. And it was past that time, but I was like, I'm going to try the link anyway. And somehow it worked, and I was able to watch it. And that's exactly what Andy was talking about. So like all of those things kind of clicked at the same time. And I'm like, there's something to this. The universe was telling me I need to do this. And then it let me download this video that I wasn't supposed to be able to download anymore. And then the sales shot up. So like, I really believe that stuff. I do have a hard time with consistency with that. But I do that very, very regularly. My goal is to do it every single day, just 10 minutes, make sure that I get that done. So reading, meditation, and exercise are the three things that I feel like I have to do every day if I want to really stay on track.
Awesome. It's your power list. Gotta have a power list.
Yeah.
Of things that make us change. And then last thing on that is associations. How have you found that that's impacted your business and your life?
So with that,
and question, add on that, were there people that you had to, because I get this asked all the time, this is a common question, were there people you had to like, people are like, I don't want to get rid of people in my life. How was that with people that you separated maybe from, and to like new people? How was that transition? Because I'm sure there's been a few transitions like that from the sounds of where your life was and where it is now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I'm kind of a loner, so I've always had a hard time keeping in touch with people. So as far as like getting rid of people, anything that I had to do because I just sort of naturally just keep to myself. So certain relationships just sort of, kind of went away. But at the same time, I feel like there's probably some, I mean, I know there are actually, there's a group of people that I was affiliated with when I first started my business, and or not in business, the graffiti thing. And I started realizing before I even knew really what core values were and all this stuff, I was like, this group of people does not align with how I am. It's not so much that they're wrong. It's not a good thing. So I ended up parting ways, and then that got all messy. Everybody just started bad mouthing me and all this stuff. I'm like, whatever. It's like, this is what it is. But so then as far as positive associations, that's why I joined Arate. I mean, being sort of like somebody that keeps to myself, and I'm not very comfortable going to events and doing all these kind of things, I was like, I need to have more people around me that are doing things, that I want to do, or, I don't even know if I really had a fully good understanding of why I needed that. I mean, one of the main reasons why I joined was because I had just listened to everything that Andy put out from the MFCEO project all the way. And I was like, this guy's giving me so much free stuff. Like I gotta do something for him, even if it's this small thing. So I started buying like supplements. I don't even really use supplements, but I was like, I'm just going to buy some protein stuff because I'm vegan. So I was like, I probably need more protein anyway. So I started buying supplements. And then when he was talking about Arate, I kind of saw it as a way of giving back to him because of all the information that I was getting from him. And then that's where the sort of idea of, I do need to be around these kind of people, and I'm not around other entrepreneurs. Like I don't even really know any other entrepreneurs. So I'm still learning that, to be honest with you. I've been RTA for 2 years now, and really going to that summit, which I never thought I would do. I was like, when I saw the price tag on those things, I was like, oh my God, I can't spend that kind of money on this, but I just didn't realize what it was really about. My whole mindset was kind of wrong about it, because I was like, I'm sure I can read all that stuff in books. Like, can I just learn all that stuff? But there's something about being in the room with all those people. And another thing that I found was it was something that I needed. I needed to be able to go up to people and say, hey, how you doing? Like, I'm not good at that. And I'm not comfortable with that. So that was one of the things that I was the most nervous about going to the summit. Was like, oh, like I have to go and like talk to people that I don't know. And I'm like just this graffiti guy, and like everybody has these like huge things that they're doing. And I didn't know if am I supposed to be here? All this kind of stuff that I'm sure like everybody feels this stuff, I mean, I'm assuming most people do. And so when I came back, that's when I really realized, just the sort of act of doing all that stuff, forming these relationships with people, even if you're not going to say, create any kind of business relationships, there's something about the momentum that builds up when you have all of those kind of interactions. So like my whole thing when I got back from the summit was like, I have to maintain this momentum, so I was like trying to talk to people on the plane, and stuff, like, because that's been a problem for me, I think, as far as, I don't really want to go up, and I'm about to do phase 3 of the Live Hard program, and I have to start a conversation with people every single day, and I'm still nervous about it, because at least at the summit, that's why everybody's there, so they expect you to come up and talk to them.
Man, you're gonna love it.
Yeah. So now what do I have to go to the gas station and just talk to some dude there? I don't know.
So good. So good. You're gonna just love it. It's so cool talking to people and just learning about their stories. It's amazing when you run into, people in the street and just like have a conversation with them. So that's going to be really cool. So, I mean, my biggest takeaway from that is like, get outside your comfort zone, make sure you're reading every day, make sure you're meditating every day, or visualizing, or something, moving your body, which is your physical activity, which I'm finally getting on that train. And stepping outside your comfort zone, and associations are everything. And, you invested into yourself. And I read this quote or heard this quote or whatever, where it's like, if you can't invest into yourself, how is anyone else going to invest into you? So it's really important to put that money back into ourselves, to be able to build a successful life and a successful business, because if we're not going to invest in ourselves, why would anyone else invest in us? So that's really cool. And I think, if anyone's listening and you're kind of an introvert, obviously Mike is an introvert, but he's making himself step outside of his comfort zone, because everything in life that's worthwhile is outside our comfort zone. So that's really, really cool for sharing. So in wrapping up, I have 3 final questions I always ask. And then if there's anything that we didn't touch on, that if, you run into someone at the coffee shop and they're like, Mike, what didn't you touch on? We'll leave with that final thought, whatever it is. So final 3 questions. Someone's looking for their purpose. What is one sentence or paragraph you would kind of say that would help them find their purpose?
That's kind of a hard one. I would imagine some people struggle with this. I would think that for me, the purpose kind of came in the form of a dog, which is kind of weird. Like I wasn't normally a dog person, and we adopted this dog, and I just fell in love with the dog, and that spawned into all this other stuff. But it got me thinking about like, what do I really care about? And it reminded me that I've always cared about animals, even when I was like a little kid. Like I saw my dad kill a gopher once, and I'm still kind of scarred from that.
Obviously, yeah.
So that ended up spawning into what my purpose is I want to make a bunch of money, and I don't really care about material things. It's not important to me, but I do want to make a lot of money, but I want to rescue animals. So I don't know if that helps anybody find their purpose, but I think another way you could do it is find your passion, which is, that's what led me back into the business that I was doing. And I know this is longer than probably it should be, but the motion graphics thing wasn't fulfilling me. And I knew I was passionate about graffiti. So I decided to pursue that. And it's actually leading to a more fulfilled life, especially in business. So
Awesome.
passion and then get a dog, I guess. I don't know.
Get a dog, find your passion. I love it. Number 2 is, and you might have more than one, obviously, but what is your favorite quote that comes to mind right now, and why?
My favorite quote, hands down, is, I probably will butcher it, but what's the guy's name? Viktor Frankl. Everybody knows this quote. Let me see if I can do it. It's between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies our freedom, I think it is. But the gist of it is, taking that space between when you're stimulated, whether it's somebody cuts you off in traffic, or, you look at your bank account and some charge happened that you didn't expect. There's a space between that stimulus and your response, and taking that time in that space to figure out how you're going to respond is incredibly important. And it's really been a huge thing in my life that I fall back on a lot. Because like I was saying, when I was angry all the time, so the stimulus, there was no space in between. It was, the response was being super pissed off and saying things that I probably shouldn't say. So that's probably my favorite
Good.
quote.
I like it. And last one is, what's one word or sentence you would want on your gravestone?
Oh man, I have no idea. Do people actually have an answer for this? That's a tough one. Really?
What do you want to be remembered for?
I don't know. I guess just put hell yeah on there.
There you go.
That'll work.
I love it. That's awesome. And is there anything finally that we didn't touch on that you think, that we should have touched on, that if, like you said, you run into someone at the coffee shop, and they say, hey, Mike, what's one step that could start me in the right direction in my life? Or, whatever that means to you, what's something that we didn't touch on that you think we should have touched on?
Yeah, I think that, I don't think we missed anything. And I mean, I feel like everything that, I'm sure there's probably little things here and there, but the gist of it was all in there. So I think we're probably good.
Love it. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Mike. As always, listeners, make sure to rate, review, subscribe. We will have all the links for Mike, whatever we've got in the show notes. So make sure to follow him and and connect with this guy. It's pretty cool. And let's go out there and change the world one starfish or one life at a time. And together, if we change one life at a time, we can change the world. Thank you so much for being on the show, Mike.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.